Okay, well, that's something. Okay, we are now live. I always say that, but it's so that everyone knows what came up on my screen that we're live. Our big question today is about types of empathy. We are continuing the conversation from yesterday about empathy. For those of you who don't know what this is, please feel free to check out yesterday's broadcast, July 6th. Today's Tuesday, July 7th, and we are talking about relevant topics in empathy. And I'm so excited to bring on another member of our panel of the Empath Counsel. Her name is Crystal Paloa, and I will give her a second to introduce herself.
I'm Crystal Paloa. I've been a singer-performer for most of my life, and I currently work as a wardrobe supervisor at a live theater. So love the arts. It's a big deal to me. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. As we were chatting about yesterday, Lindsay, do you want to give us a brief recap on the definition of empathy that we sort of laid out there?
Yes, I will. So the definition of empathy that we talked about in yesterday's podcast is that empathy is feeling with someone. And it's when we are aware of other people and we recognize that they are going through something and we recognize that emotion. And then we connect with that emotion and therefore connect with them. So it's feeling with someone in that emotion, whether we've experienced their same struggle or not.
Yes, wonderful. A couple things that I liked about yesterday's conversation. We talked about willing versus unwilling empathy, and I want to come back to that in just a second. And we talked about some things to support demonstrating empathy, as well as making sure that you are being empathetic and not trying to take over someone else's experience. And some of the things that we talked about within that are modeling good behavior, being a conduit to the voice that needs help rather than trying to usurp that voice. We talked about taking action even when you feel scared of making a mistake. We talked about receiving feedback. So I thought that those were all really great points, and I just wanted to reiterate them before we dive into today's topic, which has to do with the 3 types of empathy. So, Lindsay, do you want to give us a little bit about the 3 types of empathy that we're specifically looking at today? Now, there's a lot of scholarly and academic things that I know you could speak to, but what are the 3 types of empathy that we're focusing on?
So the 3 questions that we're going to answer today are how we can demonstrate empathy toward those who have been through something that we've been through. And then also for those who are going through something that we can imagine. And then practicing empathy toward those who struggle with something we can't imagine. Yeah. So something we've been through, something we can imagine, and something we can't imagine are the things that we're going to cover today.
Okay, and there is a wonderful, I am blanking on the name right now, a wonderful article. I will think of it by the end of this conversation. I'll be able to quote it, where the correlate to those 3 types of empathy is people like ourselves, something that's us, and then people within our sphere, like people that we love, people our family, and then people out in the world, strangers. So those are those 3 levels, and those correlate somewhat to our ability. Like we can imagine someone we love going through something, but is it easy? What's the struggle between a stranger going through something and us understanding that? So what I wanted to start with was just a little story, and it's about, when my son was born, he went in the hospital after 5 days. He was 5 days old, and he went in the hospital. He was in the ICU. And I happened to mention this to a group of friends. And one of my friends said, "Oh my goodness, my son was in that exact ICU unit. What do you need? I will drive over there. I will bring you crackers." Like she was just right on it. And she was, right there. So what I wanted to ask based on yesterday's conversation with willing and unwilling empathy is that empathy? And if so, basically, this correlate between that 3rd type of empathy that we mentioned and the type of empathy where we're forced into imagining what someone else has been through. How does that constrict empathy, and how does it allow empathy more? So I'm not sure I'm asking that a really great way, but the context is when you've been through something, does that make it empathy or does that just make it memory? what's the difference between empathy and remembering what you've been through?
Yeah, I would argue that she was expressing compassion for you, because compassion is empathy in action. That's my simplified definition of compassion for my, that's not the academic, that's just mine. And so I think she was expressing compassion for you because she was recalling, like, part of empathy is recalling what you've been through. And so it is a memory. And you are connecting to that emotion. She was probably connecting to the emotion of what she felt when she had her baby in that ICU, and could then imagine what you were going through. And so I think it was willing, this is my opinion, I think it was willing empathy for her. And I think she was, there's cognitive empathy and there's emotional empathy. And I think she was acting on the emotional empathy there, connecting to the emotions. And the compassion part comes in when she was acting on that to do something to help alleviate your suffering. And so so compassion is empathy in action. And then the little bit after that is to alleviate someone's suffering. So that would be my opinion on what she was doing. Not knowing her and her thought process, I don't know for sure, but that's what I would imagine as an outsider.
Okay, great. Caveat, in case she's watching this at any point, I find her to be one of the most empathetic people I've ever met. So, I just want that off the table. I'm not trying to make a value judgment on her as a person. I just wanted to talk about this act because I think it's a really good example of someone. I mean, she knows me. She knows my son. I know her son. All of those things are in play. Okay, Crystal, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Lindsay. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about the last few weeks, as far as like empathy goes, I'm big on the what is it? The like your love languages. I don't know if you guys know about that, but love languages are a big thing in reading people and love languages. And immediately it sounds like she just acts of service was like something that jumped into her realm of empathy, which I love and stuff. But I just think I agree with Lindsay. I mean, I don't know her, but I think that I agree with everything she said, just where that was her part of her reach of empathy was to show an act of service towards you.
Right.
So,
right.
And I want to add one thing too. I think that to engage with our empathetic feelings. Okay, what am I going to say? To engage with our empathetic feelings and to act compassionately, I don't think we have, and for it to be willing, I don't think we have to think to ourselves, okay, Kate has a baby in the ICU, and so I am going to empathize with her, and then I'm going to act and have it be compassionate. Like, I think it can just be in us, like Crystal was saying, it may be how she expresses her love for you, her care for you, and her act of that is compassion, which is empathy in action. And so I don't think we have to like consciously think of that, or like, it just might be part of us.
It might be that intuitive. Okay, because one of the things that I really want to approach right now, so Lindsay, that brings us to this next topic, which is great. I want to talk about the identity of empathy versus actually demonstrating empathy. So Crystal, what do you think the differences are between just, hey, here's the identity of empathy versus demonstrating the empathy?
right. Let me see. So I mean, I saw something recently that said empathy is not sympathy, reassurance, or pity. And I just thought, okay, wait, because I listened to a bit of yesterday's broadcast, and sympathy was brought up a lot, and like kind of the difference between the two. The demonstrate, I feel like it's just hard because sometimes with people, you just can't ever put yourself into somebody's shoes, I think. And like, even though as much as somebody wants to try to,
Yes.
it's such a huge, yes, it's a word, and it's like there's that one word, and what am I trying to say? But it's so broad. There's like so many things that come with that one word, and the way that we all kind of understand it or try to understand it. So I don't know. When it comes to the demonstrating, I've just always been, I guess, like personally, I've always just been somebody to listen as much as I can to figure out where this person is coming from. But at the same time too, I can't say that I always understand or can put myself in that place. We talk about imagining, being able to put yourself into that person's place, but a lot of times we just really can't. And I don't know, so it just kind of becomes a little bit muddied for me. Even though, yeah, like absolutely you want to be empathetic to everybody's situation and to try to understand as best as you possibly can. But there are just situations I've been thinking a lot about that I'm just like, I just don't know. I just don't know how I would feel or how to demonstrate other than just to sit and listen and love and look into your life without judgment and try to be as unselfish and like caring as possible when it comes to anybody's scenario in life or their situations that they're dealing with. But I don't know if that really answers that. But yeah,
it does. I have a question about the judgment and the selfishness. Do you think that can be conscious? Do you think that it can be conscious where we look at the selfishness or the judgment and say, I'm not going to judge here consciously? Do you think that that's a form of empathy? Do you think that
absolutely? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think really one of the biggest things with empathy for me is to look into somebody's life without judgment and to understand like their walk of life is completely different from mine. Even if we maybe have grown up or come up in the same community or or been a part of the same groups, that kind of a thing, your life is always still just going to be different from what my experience is, and even if I am a person of color, it's not if I'm a person of color. It's just my experience is going to be so different from every other person of color, and from we're still not going to have the same, even from my own siblings, that kind of a thing. We're not going to have the same experiences as each other. So I just it's one of those, just looking into each other's situations and trying to be as understanding as possible without judgment.
Got it. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts?
I do. And I'm sorry for the coughing.
No, you're just fine. Yesterday I had to sneeze really bad, like right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, I do have thoughts. I love how you described your process, Crystal, for when someone comes to you with something that they're experiencing, because I think listening, well, I know. So I study compassion in my master's program right now. And listening, I'm finding, is the number one way people identify with having someone express compassion for them. Sorry. Oh my gosh. So in studies that people have done, they ask people, okay, so how did you know someone was expressing compassion for you? And the number one thing that people say is that they listened. And I would argue that it is without the judgment that you were talking about. And so I think that going back to what you were saying too, Crystal, the idea that you come into someone's life and are experiencing that with them, in that moment, you're like putting your own stuff on a shelf. And my professor, Claire Canfield, says that all the time. Like when you're creating space for someone, and that's what you were doing, Crystal, when you're creating space for someone to listen to them and hear them and do that without judgment, some of your stuff is probably going to come up. You are going to connect with experiences that you've had. Maybe they're different, but as people are talking, we just naturally think about experiences that we've had, because then that helps it resonate more with us, that emotion that they're feeling. But we can put our stuff on a shelf. Can't see my hand. We can put our stuff on a shelf and come back to it later. And we're approaching them without that judgment as we're doing that. I'm going to step away for just a second. So sorry.
Okay. No, I was, as I was listening to you, Crystal, one of the things that I was thinking about is how so often and from an observational standpoint, what's interesting is that I noticed my own judgment towards people who judge.
Mm.
And so I was like,
Mhm.
you know, when people get really judgmental and they try to claim that, you know, a moral high ground,
Right.
sometimes I get really judgmental towards them. And I was like, oh, am I not
Yeah.
empathizing with them as well? Like,
Right.
are there spaces where there's like judging the judgers, you know, like
No, I
judge
hear
the
you.
judgers.
Yeah, absolutely. To be like, calm down. Can you just calm down for a second? Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
let me, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at the bigger. I always like, there's always just like a bigger picture, you know, to everything.
Mhm.
And we always have just like this super small, um, the small vision, or like, you know, look into things, and we don't see like a lot of the bigger picture
Mhm.
when we are trying to empathize, you know, and stuff. So I mean, a lot of times too, yeah, we do throw back into like our own experiences, and
Mhm.
but that even could be so tiny compared to what this person is actually trying to express. I think that's
Yeah.
where that does come in, the listening, to try to actually understand instead of like throwing in your own, you know, your own experiences right away. Or yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so Lindsay, I was just saying that I judge the judgers
Yeah.
as I'm trying to be more, you know, how far does my empathy extend, you know, someone who is judging, you know, is there empathy for people that I can't imagine deserve empathy? And, you know, who deserves empathy? Who gets to decide that? You know, what's the value
Mm,
judgment on that? And I think that we have to be very cautious about that. Um, so the follow-up question that I had then is, you know, along the lines of the identity of empathy, where people say I'm an empath, or they say, you know, all the emotions are really, really high for me. And Lindsay was talking about cognitive empathy versus emotional empathy. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of look at there was, how does that affect people who say that they're empaths? Does that mean that they are good at the skill of willing empathy, or is that only because they can just feel all of the emotions? Is that a thing?
mm,
So what are your thoughts on that?
mm. Um, hmm, that's a hard one. I mean, I definitely believe there are those that are amazing empaths. Like I feel like they immediately tend to get it. I think when anything comes up in someone's life and they're able to feel immediately, yes, I sympathize with you. I'm here for you. I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, there are those I feel will maybe have those same qualities and take those on, but maybe not do them in the best way, or show them in the best way towards
Mm-hmm.
who I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it kind of. It's we're all so different. It really is just the person, and not knowing for sure. I don't know whether you know the person personally or if they're a stranger, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of. I just think that there's a lot that goes along with the relationship that you have with that person as well. Does that make sense? I don't know if
Yeah,
yeah,
that does make sense. And we'll talk a little bit more about that relationship stuff in just a second.
yeah.
Lindsay, were you able to hear the question?
I heard part of it.
Okay.
You okay with
So sorry.
it?
I
We're
don't know what
empathizing
You
with the
okay
struggle.
with it?
in my throat right here. There's like a little scratch tickle thing that
Oh
will
no.
not stop.
Did you get the
Okay.
corona while we were on the call?
Oh my god, we're more than 6 feet away, but you gave me the corona.
It's not very
Okay, so
exciting.
Yeah.
the part of the question that I heard, and I'm so sorry for all the viewers who are watching this right now. So you were asking about the identity of an empath, so people who identify as an empath, and then I didn't hear the rest of the question.
Yeah, the struggle that I think I've been looking at lately is, you know, you listed this out with cognitive empathy versus emotional empathy. And I think that a lot of the time what I hear from people who identify as empaths is that they are unwillingly feeling every emotion in the room. And so I think that we are defining the skill of empathy to be something different. It's not just about feeling the emotions that are going on in the room. And so I wanted to chat a little bit about that cognitive versus emotional empathy. What comes into play with that? And as far as demonstrating empathy, because that's what this whole broadcast is about. It's about being able to increase our skill set and demonstrating empathy. That's why we're here. So with that goal in mind, what would you say is necessary in order to get someone who just feels every emotion in the room to a point where they can demonstrate that empathy.
Sorry.
You're okay.
This is miserable. I'm so
I
sorry.
know, you're just fine.
Okay. So I think that when you are feeling empathy and you want to translate that into action to alleviate people's suffering, you have to be willing to do it. So if you're an empath, I would imagine that you are aware of people's feelings in the room, and you can perceive perhaps what they're experiencing. You can take their perspective for what they might be experiencing, and then you have to choose to act. It's a choice thing. You have to choose to do something about it. And so you have to be aware of the humanity of the other person, not just aware of the emotion that they might be experiencing, because you are feeling the room. You know, you have to be aware and make your choice to do so.
I think that that's incredibly relevant. I think that taking action towards someone sort of decreases the judgment that you have towards them. I learned a long time ago, there's this psychology principle, and I actually learned it from a teacher who's a religious scholar, and he taught motion yields emotion. So the idea is that in order to feel something, a lot of the time you have to take action towards it. So instead of wanting to have the confirmation of that feeling before taking action and allowing that feeling to spark you into action, sometimes in order to get to that feeling, you have to take action. How does that play into this for both of you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have a thought. Crystal, is that okay if we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I was reading an article this week about patient care, patient experiences, and the doctors and nurses in this study enacted cognitive empathy. And so cognitive empathy is when they are thinking about what people might be experiencing. Like, okay, you come in and you have this wound, you're going through this thing. I can clearly see that you're going through something. And so they take that thought process and they put that into action through their cognitive empathy. They're not necessarily feeling empathy with that person. That could be very fatiguing if you're a nurse or a doctor or some sort of medical staff and you're seeing that all the time in the hospital, for example. And so they enact that cognitive empathy and take action in that way. And so is this answering your question, Kate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they act on that rather than the empath, perhaps. I haven't studied empaths. So, but what I'm thinking is that the empath is connecting with the emotional empathy and probably some cognitive empathy as well, but they're connecting with that emotion. And I'm zeroing in here on the heart. That tends to be correlated with empathy and compassion. Anywho. So the empath, where they're maybe more natural at it, I don't know. But then like in that setting where maybe you aren't necessarily connecting with that emotion, but you see someone is in pain. And so you take action to help alleviate that pain. And that might be through the cognitive empathy because you're not connecting with the emotion, but you see someone is experiencing something and you're like, oh my gosh, that would feel horrible. They are probably in pain, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, whatever. And then you tap into that. I think it all goes back to humanity. Like you can see someone's humanity when they're in pain. And so you want to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Crystal, did you have anything to add?
I mean, not really. I don't know why, but while you were talking about that, both of you, I just kept thinking fight or flight in my head. And just that what's inside of us to whether we fight or not, like, or whether we take action or not, so I kept going between those words in my head, kept flashing, fight or flight. And seeing people jump to action, you know, when they are trying to empathize, compared to those that are just kind of like, I don't know what this is. Let me just step back and let you, you know, do your thing and deal with what you're dealing with. But I agree with Lindsay on, you know, with that, the action of like actually showing up and what am I trying to say? Showing up and just kind of trying. I think that's just like you said,
Yeah.
humanity. We're just trying. We're trying to be, you know, as open as we possibly can. Hopefully, you know, as empathetic as um what am I trying to say? Just like open minded to everybody's situations, you know. And so so I just keep thinking fight or flight. Am I active or inactive in my life? Do I try to empathize with people when it comes to their situations, or am I very much a person that'll sit back and just let them deal with that, you know, kind of a thing? And I, you know, hopefully I think it's more on the empathetic side, and hopefully we're trying to do that more so than just allowing people to, you know, sit in their lives and not really care about what's going on in
Yeah.
other people's lives. Because what was it
Yeah,
that Brené
for
Brown said?
sure.
She, do you know what quote I'm talking? Not that in, yeah, that in order to empathize, what is that? With in order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it,
See things the way
and not and
believe them
not
as you see it,
how you
right?
imagine their experience to be, or so, yeah, something like that, right? Is that what she said? But us just
Yeah,
trying. I think that's life, is us trying to see someone's experience and be able to try to feel as much as we can with them, instead of just trying to and not imagining how they feel. You know, I don't know. Does that make
right.
sense? Their experience to be, but
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what she said,
yeah.
but yeah.
No, I love that. And when you were saying the fight and flight, what I was thinking is the name of that system in your body is the parasympathetic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always thought that
Mm-hmm.
that's really interesting that you would have that be a part of that, you're either going to grow closer or distance. And the other thing
Mm-hmm.
that I was thinking is you were, you know, that with that point is that judgment is a form of distancing, whereas
Mm-hmm.
empathy is a form of growing closer or connecting further. So in order
Mm-hmm.
to see someone's humanity, you have to connect yourself further to their story. You have to connect yourself further to what they're going through. And that belief is also another opposition to that judgment. In judgment, you're distancing yourself from the story and saying, this is not something that I would ever experience or do, versus connecting closer.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, I like to put things in very clear terms for, you know, demonstration purposes, you know, like understanding something, like Lindsay was saying yesterday, being aware of something is the gateway to like everything else. So, but then once we get there, I'm really interested in establishing processes, you know, because from a cognitive standpoint, I believe that we start off with skill sets in a hard fashion. You know, we have to be very conscientious of our skills, and then we grow to a point where we're unconsciously skilled towards something as we become consciously
Mm-hmm.
skilled towards it in the middle there. So I think that there's a cognitive awareness that you can do to practice empathy without feeling it up front.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Okay, so I just wanted to, I don't want to cut anybody off or anything, but what I really wanted to ask about, um, I had a friend tell me, and this just very shocking to me, but you know, she read one of my posts about Black Lives Matter, and she commented on it, and she actually reached out to me in a private message, and she said, "Yeah, thanks for posting that. I know that matters to you because of your nephews." And I thought, wait a minute. No, Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter. Like, that's just the
Mm-hmm.
end of that. Like, whether or not I have a nephew who has an African father, like, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, like, that shouldn't affect things, you know? And she said, well, the people that I've noticed who are fighting for this have someone close to them who's Black. And I thought that, you know, to me, that's sort of a racist belief that if you see through that lens, you're not, you know, giving people an opportunity to really see that, no, the argument stands. So, you know, how much should our familial relationships, how much should our empathy depend on how we feel for the other person? is, and I don't mean how we feel for them, like Lindsay's definition, well, our definition, the working definition that we've talked about with empathy. What I mean is like our love and our experience with someone. Should our empathy be based on that? Should we be doing it that way? And if not, why?
I have thoughts.
Go, Lindsay.
But I feel like I go a lot first.
No, you go. I'm a listener, so I like to sit back and listen to go.
So I feel like your friend who reached out to you might be experiencing that, like where she's looking around and from what her perspective is, she sees that happening, and so that's her frame of reference. And that can always be broadened. So then to answer your question about the familial thing or something that's familiar to us, I don't think that we have to just show empathy for the people that we know and love personally. In fact, I think it's crucial that we extend that outward to people that we do not know. There are far more people that we do not know that are hurting and that are in pain than people that we do know. The people that we do know that are hurting and in pain are absolutely important. And we can do great things there for them as we listen and as we are present for them and we try to alleviate their suffering. I think that there is something, now this is my own personal, I don't want to say soapbox, but that's what I'm going to say. My own personal mission is to help people connect with their own humanity and connect with their own emotions and connect with their own sense of self so that then, and what they need and what they are all about, so that then they can connect with others, whether they are familiar to them or not. Because I personally think that the way to save the world and have world peace is through compassionate communication. I genuinely think that. I think that we need more of that in our lives and in our world, not just in our country, but throughout. And like I said, there are far more people that we don't know and they're experiencing pain. And if we can connect with ourselves, connect with our own emotions, understand those, then we can see them more, those same emotions in other people. So I was reading a study and there are like 5 to 8, it's debatable, 5 to 8 core emotions, and they manifest themselves in very similar ways across the globe. Whether you're from France or whether you're from United States, whatever, you express those emotions in a very similar fashion. And so if we can connect with our own selves and what those emotions are and how we feel them physiologically, what our thoughts are, all of that kind of stuff, then we can more easily connect with people who are different from us or who we don't know. And we don't just have to like hold all of our empathy glitter for ourselves. We can spread it everywhere.
Empathy glitter. I love that. For sure. I'm going to make t-shirts.
Empathy glitter. Yes.
Yes.
I love that. I love it.
Okay. Crystal, go for it.
Yeah. So I believe that we, for sure, you're going to empathize a lot more with people that are like within your inner circle. Of course, I think that that's just natural with all of us. We're going to immediately show a lot more empathy towards those that are in our inner circle, our family, our friends, those that are the closest to us, whether it be at work as well. But I agree with Lindsay. I was thinking about, there's an Instagram influencer that I follow where she started this saying, I believe she's the one that started it, but it was, until we fix it here in our heart and address it in our homes, nothing changes the world. We can't change or fix the world, kind of a thing. And I was thinking about that as Lindsay was talking to, but I agree with that. I think that our reach is so much broader than what we maybe think. We're only one person, and that's always like the thought, I'm only one person, what can I do? But our reach is so much broader than that, and understanding that we have a voice, or we can show in action, in our actions, that we can be more empathetic and show humanity towards anybody that we may meet, or on the street, or whether it be just right here in our small communities or, just all the way out into the world, So I was thinking about that, just like this in your heart, in your home, fix the world thing. And it's like our reach is so much broader than what we typically think. And it's cool to see that in action with a lot of people.
Oh, it really is. And I feel like it's not sheer numbers to me when you look at protests or anything like that in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. To me, there is, it's the quietest people standing up. It's those that have to take so much extra effort because it costs them something to say something about it. There was that picture of that girl who was standing alone in her city on a street corner. And she was like, I was the one who turned up, and people are driving by and calling her names and everything, but she's standing there. And I think that's really important. When what you said just sparked this memory. We went to see the Dalai Lama when he came to the University of Utah here. And he said, how do we create change? And that was his big, overarching theme. And the big thing that he recommended was, as a family, you sit down and you talk to another family and you show them what you're talking to them about. And then they talk to another family, and then they talk to another family. And he said, the strength of this is that you are gathering people to your hearts, you're sharing the message, and then they are gathering people to their hearts. And one by one, as Lindsay pointed out, compassionate communication is we're doing that for one another. I was amazed by another friend. We were having a conversation, and she said, I used to be the type that performed compassion. And I thought that was an amazing admission, because I thought, wow, have I ever performed compassion? What have I done in my life that has been performative versus truly intentional? And I said, when did it change for you? I don't know. I got so busy worrying about making sure that I was being compassionate that I forgot to check. And I thought that was a really interesting lesson. There's the performative aspect, going back to what we were talking about yesterday with messing up and being willing to mess up. Maybe your intention isn't pure, but at least you're taking action towards that end, Okay. I feel like that's a pretty good place to pause the conversation, of course. Yesterday I said stop the conversation, but I think the pausing the conversation until we can come back to it. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So I just posted something in the comments that I really hope that you will answer the questions that we presented here. What are your thoughts on it? We love to read those in the comments, and I get notified every time those come up. So I know that our panel members will be interested in hearing what you have to say too. All three of us very committed to listening and feeling very strongly that listening is one of the main pathways towards more solid empathy. All right. So Lindsay, I think we get you again tomorrow. And then Crystal, do we get you again? Is it Friday or Thursday?
Thursday.
That's right, Thursday. Hey, getting used to the schedule. Woohoo! All right.
Yay!
Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your thoughts and participating in the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Bye.